You know, this is something that I always wanted. I always wanted to fish professionally for a living. Even going back into first and second grade career day, I was a professional bass fisherman. And so I never deviated from that. That was what I've always chose, and that's always what I wanted to do. So, you know, I put those blinders on and I did everything, anything that I could possibly think of to put myself in the best position to make that happen.
7 years ago, I relocated to Indianapolis, Indiana, and it was in the inner city, and I'm a Kentucky boy, avid outdoorsman. Wasn't really sure how it was gonna work for me. And on my way in, I passed a kid on a bike, and he had 2 fishing rods, and I was like, well, I have some hope. So I proceed to the house that I'm moving into, and I have, you know, a few loads, and I didn't get a chance to meet the neighbors yet, and I saw, you know, made eye contact with a couple of them. So I'm on my last load, so I pull my fishing rods out of the truck, I had them on top of the other packages, and I lean them up on the truck, and I look over, and my neighbor's walking out the door, I suppose to introduce himself to me. So I make sure my rods are secure, and I turn around to say hello, and he's like, do you fish? And I was like, yeah, I fish. He's like, you fish tournaments? I'm like, yeah, I fish tournaments. He's like, do you want to be a professional angler? I'm like, yeah, I'd love to be a professional angler. He kind of shakes his head a little bit, and he's like, well, almost like he's sorry. You'll never beat my son. It wasn't 5 minutes later. You know, I'm done unloading all my stuff, and I look down the street, and here's this kid riding his bike. He's got 2 fishing rods over his shoulder. He's got tackle boxes blowing out his book bag. And I'm thinking to myself, is this the kid I can't beat?
When I reminisce back to my first few memories of fishing tournaments, I can remember vividly going down to the local ramp right there in the river, White River, and every Wednesday night there would be a team tournament. And you know, we didn't have a boat when I was younger, and I can remember just going down there with about 4 or 5 rods and tackle bag and riding 2.5 miles just to get to the ramp to have that opportunity to jump in the boat with someone.
Me and Jacob met at White River in Broad Ripple, and on that particular day there were several guys and there were several individuals who wasn't paired up.
And he'd wait there just in case somebody was without a partner. And he'd wait a lot of times without going out. I mean, I think it was week after week after week.
You know, right here is where I would sit with my bike, and I remember 2 or 3 weeks would go by where nobody would take me out, and you know, but it didn't bother me. It was the fact of getting out here and having that opportunity.
With Jake being a kid, they bought him down, and no one would take him out. And I kind of reached out to a couple of the individuals that I knew and asked would they take him out. And
the tournament director comes over to me, and there's this kid on a bicycle over there, and he wanted me to take him out fishing, and I really didn't want to. And the more I thought about it, I said, all right, okay. And the very first fish he caught was like a 4-pounder. And I told him right then, I said, you're hired. You can fish with me from now on. And anyway, it turned out pretty good. We ended up winning that tournament, and we've been fishing ever since, you know, so.
Yeah, I can remember the first tournament that I took Jacob to. One of the first tournaments that I took him to was a Junior World Championship qualification. We had all these pretty boats in the water, and here we are sitting in this old 1960 Tidal Craft, 50-horse Merc, no bilge pump.
And it had holes in it. But I remember very vividly at that day when I went out and we got out there with all those boats. There's all these new nice Rangers and nice Skeeters and nice boats all over the place. And I looked at Dad and I said, Dad, I said, I don't know if we can beat these guys.
I said, Jacob, this is one of your first life lessons. Boats don't catch fish.
For me, it was that appearance, like, wow, I don't know if this little old boat right here, we really don't have enough to beat these guys. And Dad told me, he said, Jacob, it's not the boat that catches them, it's the fishermen.
I offered Jacob an opportunity to come fish on my lake. Me and Jake, got together. I had a nice boat on the lake that had a nice trolling motor. It had an engine on it, and
that really opened up a whole new world to me. Being able to fish on a body of water that had a lot of fish, that had hard bottom, that had docks, that had wood, that had grass, that had ledges. I mean, it really set up like, almost like a mini Kentucky lake or something like that. And we're be able to have something that like that to learn on was really the turning point where everything started to click. When I was 14, I remember getting into an event, a junior tournament on Hardy Lake. I was a non-boater, and I drew out with this kid, Brett.
The very first time that I ever met Jacob was on Hardy Lake. And I drew this kid, Jacob Wheeler, and he got in my boat, and we went out to my first spot, and we didn't do very well on my spots. And when my pattern didn't work out, we ditched all my stuff and we went to his water. It only took him, I bet you, an hour, and he had his limit in the boat. And my jaw was just to the floor because I was getting my butt handled to me.
From that day forward, Brett and I built a friendship, and that was, until this day, it still is very strong. And I can remember days going out with Brett. We'd go down to the White River, we'd go over to Eagle Creek, or it didn't matter where we were going as long as we were on the water.
I had a couple friends in the club that I was in, and they said, hey, there's this kid, you know, he's pretty good fisherman, he's, trying to get started and so forth, you really need to meet him. That was when I first ran into Jacob, and I think he was 13 at the time.
His mechanics and his fundamentals, even at the age of 14, he was at a level here when most anglers at 14 are about here.
Every once in a while you get in the boat and you just sort of realize right away, that this person's fishing at a different level, and given his age at the time, that's what really struck me. Is
you don't ever count him out. If he's got a bad day on the water, you better look out for the next day, because he's coming back with 100 times more intensity than he came with the first day.
I really feel like all my passion, dreams and aspirations and time spent on the water all come down to one end result, and that was qualifying for the Bassmasters Classic. And now that it's here, all I can think about is how bad I want to win.
Jacob will be a contender at the Bassmaster Classic.
because of his consistency.
Because of his relentless pursuit.
And he always seemed to find a way to be at the ramp the next day.
He never quits learning.
He just always wins.
People have to realize when he shows up for these big tournaments, he's there to win, and people are going to have a hard time beating him.